Hello, everyone. My name is Matteo Mecacci. I'm the president of the International Campaign for Tibet, and I'm here today with my colleague Buchung, who's the vice president at the ICT, because we have very, very exciting news to share with you. Last night, the US Congress, first the House and then the Senate, passed the Tibetan Policy and Support Act. This is a major legislation that upgrades US policy on Tibet and is legislation on which we have been working with your support of ICT members and in particular, Tibetan Americans all across the US for a couple of years to push members of Congress to update the legislation. So it's a major accomplishment for our movement, and so we are here to talk more about that and its content. And so I will start with this, Buchung, asking you to describe to our viewers what does this legislation do for Tibet.
Yeah, the Tibetan Policy and Support Act has three pertinent issues. First, broadly, it upgrades and strengthens American policy towards Tibet from the one that was laid out in 2002 when the Tibetan Policy Act was passed. Since then, there have been much development in the United States, in China, and in Tibet. And this TPAC now encapsulates those developments and presents the American position to meet the new situation. So that is the broader context. Mm-hmm. Within that context is the support to the preservation and promotion of Tibetan culture and way of life. That includes Tibetan religious tradition, and particularly the tradition of the reincarnation system of the Dalai Lama. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama has, since 2011, clearly outlined how he foresees the institution of the Dalai Lama to be for not just the Tibetan people, but for the followers of Tibetan Buddhism and his disciples throughout the world. However, the Chinese government is politicizing the issue of the institution of the Dalai Lama and staking its claim and its authority. The atheist government is staking its authority to select the next Dalai Lama. So this act negates that Chinese position, says that the international community will only recognize the will of the present Dalai Lama and the Tibetan tradition as practiced by the Tibetan Buddhist community. So, and also it has formalization of many of the programmatic support that the United States has been giving to the Tibetan people for every year. And all these are aimed at preservation or promotion of Tibetan culture. These are within the context of a new role given to the special coordinator to promote a negotiated solution to the Tibetan issue. So these are one element. Second, the TPAC acknowledges the reality of the Tibetan environment, particularly the water resources, and how these are impacting downstream countries, not just downstream countries, but region as a whole, and China's action towards Tibetan rivers which flow downstream. And TPAC also outlines the United States' position on the. Thirdly, TPAC has commended the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan people on the expansion of the Tibetan democratic governance system and how now the Tibetans duly elected political leadership who run the Central Tibetan administration are a democratic institution that looks into the interests of the Tibetan community in diaspora throughout the world. So these are the main issues that the bill covers. And now I'll get back to you and Matthew to say from the U.S. government perspective, what do you think this TPAC signifies?
Yeah, no, I think this is a very important question because what happened last night, doesn't happen. It didn't happen in a vacuum. This is part of a larger context related to U.S. Policy on China and more specifically on Tibet. As some of our viewers may remember, at the end of 2018, it was December 2018, the US Congress passed another important legislation, called the Reciprocal Access to Tibet Act. And this was the first congressional action since a number of years on US-China relations, focusing on Tibet, and in particular on the question of trying to have more access for American citizens to Tibet, which China has been blocking not only for American citizens, but for all international visitors, whether they're journalists, diplomats, or researchers, or NGO workers, to Tibet for decades as part of their effort to isolate Tibet from the outside world and preventing also information from coming out from Tibet. And so that legislation signified a shift also in congressional attitude towards US policy on China, specifically on Tibet, because for a number of years, the US government had also pursued a policy of engagement with China, which led somehow to downgrade the focus and the attention on human rights issues. This was connected to many economic and diplomatic developments between the United States and China over the years, and there was a prevailing view that by engaging China on the economic level, that would bring also political reforms. Unfortunately, this has not happened, and that legislation was the first sign that Congress was not buying anymore that kind of narrative. And that was later followed by other important legislation on Uyghurs, and we know about the very grave human rights violations that have been targeting the Uyghur population over the last few years. Legislation on Hong Kong because of the basically downgrading and the stripping of the autonomy that Hong Kong had been enjoying for many years, and also on Taiwan. So I think if you look at that in that context, and it's important for our Tibet supporters to know that what happens on Tibet doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in a context, in a political context, which has led the US to try to be more assertive through actually congressional initiatives in terms of its policy on China. So I think this bill it's an important stepping stone in that kind of efforts, and it really, I think, in our view, opens the door for a more international coordinated effort to try to align also other governments on these kind of positions. And we know, Buchung, that in order to be able to achieve that, Tibetan Americans have played an important role. But you are, someone who was born in India, lived there, then moved to the United States. So I think you have, a quite unique perspective from, the Tibetan point of view. What does, this bill mean for Tibetans, both in exile, but also for, people inside Tibet?
Yeah, overall, I think to all Tibetans everywhere, this bill is a reassurance and a hope that has been given to them that the international community, particularly the United States, has not forgotten the plight of the Tibetan people. This is critical because over the years, the Chinese authorities have been launching a propaganda whereby the Tibetans are being made to feel that China's might has made the world succumb to its power and that no one cares about Tibet. So this, yes, again shows that there are countries in the free world who care about Tibet, and that the Tibetan Policy and Support Act is there to protect the Tibetan people. So that is for all Tibetans, particularly for those Tibetans inside Tibet who don't have any ways of showing their feelings of it. For Tibetan refugees in the Indian subcontinent particularly, this bill also makes them confident that the United States will continue to support their attempt to preserve and promote their distinct cultural, religious, and heritage through these programmatic support and on the broader issue of the solution of the Tibetan issue. For Tibetan Americans, in addition to all these other matters, I think TPS yet again shows that the Tibetan Americans can no longer feel subservient to the American political system, that they are masters of the American political system as much as every other American citizen is. And as you said earlier, over the years, I've felt the growth of Tibetan political activism here in the United States, and the Tibetan Americans have gone from a position of being subservient, just supplicating for support, to one as equal citizens who want their members of Congress, who want their administration to do something for people of Tibet because they care about the people of Tibet. So it means the issue of Tibet has become and is becoming more and more a domestic issue of the United States. And that is very important for us, even as China tries to make the case that the Tibetan issue is an internal affairs of China. So these are something that comes to my mind when you made that question. But going back to your earlier issue about the United States and its role, now that the US has passed the TPAC and the president will be signing it, maybe by the time this video comes online, the president may have signed, I hope. But in any case, what do we think as ICT that other countries can do on similar matters?
Yes, I mean, this is something on which we have already been working for a few years, because when we decided to focus on TPSA, a couple of years ago, thanks to naturally the initiative of congressional leaders, we need always to remember that whatever happens in Congress is because there are American politicians who put these issues on their top list and their priority, and we are very fortunate to have these leaders in Congress that respond to the advocacy that we carry out and the mobilization. But without them, the legislation would not happen. So this is a success for the American people, not for ICT or for our members only. And I think that's very, very important to remember. But when we decided to go on this priority, we also work with our offices in Europe to agree on a strategy, building hopefully on the success that we may have in the US, as we did with the Reciprocal Access to Tibet Act, also to involve and convince other countries to follow through. And there have already been some positions taken by some governments in Germany, the Netherlands, the European Commission, in France, on the question of the interference in the succession of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, putting on record these governments, thanks to initiatives of other members of parliament in Europe, that it would be only up to Tibetan Buddhists and the Dalai Lama himself to determine how the selection process is going to unfold. But we had also another very important official position taken last August by 5 UN special rapporteurs on different issues, including on religious freedom, which formally sent a communication to the Chinese government telling them that their own existing regulations on religious freedom and the selection process of the Dalai Lama is not in line with international accepted human rights standards, and specifically on religious freedom. So this gives us a little bit of, let's say, overarching umbrella of international rules and norms that other countries are then supposed to follow, because this is what the UN does. It sets the stage for criteria that governments who subscribe to the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights then have to follow. So our efforts now are going to be with the leadership of our colleagues in Europe, really to try to engage other governments to follow this example taken by the US, and create an international coalition that would signal to China that it would be better not to try to continue on those policies that they've been implementing over the last few years. So this is this has been our strategy, and I want also to take this opportunity, because some of you may have already seen in some of our communications to our members and then on our website that I will be leaving ICT in the next few weeks, as I have been appointed by the Organization for Cooperation and Security in Europe to lead their Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights. This is an institution that is comprised of 57 countries, and I had the great honor to be appointed by them to lead this office, which is going to be based in Warsaw. And I want to, express once again my gratitude to all of you, and to the great honor that the board of ICT and the staff has provided me over these years to work with you on Tibet. And I think there's no better way to end my term here at ICT than having the passage of TPSA by the US Congress. So I'm really, really grateful for this. And I want to say also, and I want to ask you, Buchung, that we know that without the support of ICT members, this would not have been possible. And so can you describe what ICT members have been doing over the last few years to make this happen?
Yeah, not just on TPSA, but on all initiatives that the International Campaign for Tibet has launched since its inception in 1988. Our supporters and members have been very critical in our entire strategy. That is because I think from the onset, ICT had the good sense to see that the American public has support for the Tibetan issue. And this public support needs to be converted to something that is concrete to the American legislature, the American members of Congress, who, if not moved by what is happening in Tibet, will be moved by what their constituents feel about issues, and thereby have adopt a relevant position on the issue of Tibet. And that has been very successful throughout the initiative. And that's also been the case with the TPSA. On this, when we laid out our strategy right from that initial meeting on this particular issue with Speaker Pelosi and her colleagues in early last year, thereby it began a process of using the members' power, so to say, to reach out to the members of Congress and to have them pay attention to the need for upgrading the Tibetan Policy Act. And the members responded very positively by the several thousands of petitions that have been sent. And there, when I speak of members, I just don't mean, of course, I really appreciate those who are paying members of the International Campaign for Tibet. But members, I can also include those very many others who may not have the wherewithal or the resources to give monetary support to the International Campaign for Tibet, but who nevertheless have been very active in supporting our work and who have made a difference. Also included are the Tibetan Americans and the Tibetan community in general here in the United States, as you said earlier. So all these have played in changing the American political sort of mindset on the issue of Tibet. Today, we don't really have to educate American policymakers, even if they are new, on the fundamentals of the Tibetan issue. They know about it. Now, as TPSA indicates, we are going to the next level where we are trying to look for concrete steps that can be taken to address those fundamental issues that the Tibetan people face. And I believe that this will happen. So before I hand it over to you, I think, Matthew, as you said earlier, since you're leaving, I wanted to say, as not just as a colleague, but as a Tibetan, it has been a pleasure working with you. We Tibetans actually don't have a choice because we are born into the movement. But individuals like yourself, particularly capable individuals or professionals, have a choice to work wherever you want with whatever sort of remuneration you might want to get. But nevertheless, in your heart, you have felt some sort of relationship for the Tibetan people, and therefore you heeded the call of our board of directors. And not just that, even I think the leadership in Dharamsala, right from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, were cognizant of your sort of work and your contribution to the Tibetan people. And that is something that I deeply appreciate. And while ICT after you may not be the same as it was in the past 7 years, we will continue to do what we can for the people of Tibet. And so back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Buchung. I really appreciate that. It moves me a little bit to think of these, past 7 years and the many meetings and experience we have had together, including visiting Dharamsala, and certainly has been probably the greatest honor of my life to enjoy the trust and the support of His Holiness the Dalai Lama during these years. Even before ICT, I visited there when I was a member of parliament in Italy, and somehow, as you said, it was a transformative trip going to Dharamsala. And I think some of our members who have been there, we have an annual trip, for some of our members, go to Dharamsala, and many other people who over the years, hundreds of thousands who have been to Dharamsala, they know that it's a special place. And I didn't have any doubt, when the opportunity came at the end of 2013 to start with ICT, as I was coming out actually of an assignment with this organization, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. So I'm really honored and grateful to have this connection with the people of Tibet in general, and I will continue to do my best in my life, to meet those aspirations and expectations. And I just want to say that both the board and the staff at ICT are very, very committed. They're very capable. We are a small but very solid team, and the ICT members who I've met, many of them who I've spoken to them, with them on the phone, it amazes to me to see the level of affection and commitment that people have for the Tibetan people, but also for its culture. And for many of them, it's really a gift that they have received when they have encountered Tibetan culture, Tibetan Buddhism, spiritual practices, other things that are so rich and important, not just for the Tibetan people. So I think this will continue, because ICT is not based on an individual. Everybody is important, but nobody is essential. This is something I always repeat to myself, and I think there's a lot of people of goodwill who will continue to support in many quarters. And I just want to thank all the ICT members who have been maybe you have been reading my emails, you've been seeing our social media posts. I haven't met you personally, some of you I have, and please continue to stay in touch and continue, most importantly, to support ICT and the people of Tibet. So thank you, and I think we can end here this program, and looking forward to new programs on Tibet Talks in the near future. Stay tuned. Thank you very much.